Welcome to Assault, Learn and Play, Part 6.8, Chapter 9.6.10, Movement Actions Part 8, Vehicle-Specific Movement. 9.10 Vehicle-Specific Movement. Vehicle units have wheeled or track as a movement type. When moving, vehicle units must always be facing a hex vertex, never a hex side. A vehicle unit can only move into its front two hexes, frontal hexes, or rear two hexes if reversing, see illustration below. Vehicle units can also change their facing. Changing facing up to one hex vertex during a move is free. Any more than one hex vertex costs one movement point per hex vertex changed. The one exception is movement on a road. During movement on a road, the vehicle may freely change its facing, including the final road hex it enters. When moving in reverse, the unit's movement allowance is halved, rounded up. Movement can be either normal or fast, unless marked with the slow attribute on the unit card. So we have two kinds of vehicles here. One is the Panther 3J, which is a tracked vehicle with 3 movement allowance, and we have a truck, which is a wheeled vehicle with 6 points movement allowance. And of course we learned we can move normal or fast. And if I activate this tank now with a normal action, we can move up to 3 hex on clear terrain, because this costs only 1 point for tracked vehicles to enter. Let us go. 1, 2, 3, we are on the road. On the road we have learned we can change facing. We can change facing with no movement costs. So after I move, or during I move on the road, I can freely change without paying movement costs. Now I want to move via this clear terrain. 1, 2, 3. So I can, in every step I move on a clear terrain, I can, or on a terrain, in every hex I enter, I can freely change one vertex for free. If I am on a clear, for example, and I want to change more than this free, I have to pay with points. So now I count again. I activate 1 point, 2 point, still 2 points, 3 points. So my movement is over. Same is of course with fast action. I have now 4 movement allowance points, 1 point, 2 point, still 2 point, 3 point. Now I can move a 4th point, and I can freely change my facing. This is how movement is done with the tank. If I want to move reverse, I have only movement allowance halved, rounded up, in this case 2 points. 3 by 2 is 2, is 2.5, rounded 1.5 rounded up is 2. So I can move backwards this hex or this hex up to 2 points. 1 point, 2 point. Sorry, it's a normal action. Here I can only move 1 point. I can freely change one vertex and move my 2nd point to the road, and there I can move freely because it costs nothing to change my facing. This is reverse movement. With wheeled vehicles is the same, but you have to check the terrain chart, because wheeled vehicles, for example on a clear terrain, pay 2 points for entering a clear terrain hex. So my truck has 6 point movement allowance, and I will do a normal action, and I can just go 1, I can change 3, 2, 3, because these are now 6 points movement allowance, because 2 points each clear hex I enter. That's so far for wheeled and tracked vehicles, normal, fast action, and moving reverse. Damage to vehicle units from terrain. Vehicle units can be damaged or become immobilized when entering certain terrain types. The terrain types capable of damaging vehicles are listed on the terrain chart in the player's aid under the vehicle damage from terrain column. If a hex containing one of these terrain types is entered, the opposing player makes an attack roll on a vehicle unit with the dice listed in the vehicle damage terrain column. The active player can send a tempered defense roll with the strongest defense die listed on the unit card. It doesn't matter if they are doing a normal or fast action. If there are any critical hits or damage points from the attack roll that haven't been cancelled by the defense roll, then the vehicle unit suffers damage. So I built up a few cases for testing. First is my truck unit wants to enter this hillside via this rocky terrain. First we have to check what do we need to enter this rocky terrain, and for wheeled vehicles we need 3 points of movement in. And we see vehicle damage from terrain is a yellow 1 for wheeled vehicles. So I have 3 points now, and I want to come up to the hillside, which is of course +2, and for the clear +1, 6. So I have 6 points, and I can do a normal action to go cross via the rocky to the clear. But when I enter the rocky, then my opponent player can roll for vehicle damage from terrain, which now is a yellow die. So he rolls versus the truck, and the truck got the suppression symbol, and the truck can defend with its strongest defense die, which is 1 blue here stated on the unit cards. And he rolls, and I roll 1 blue die here, and I have nothing as a result. So I get a suppressed, which means this truck is stuck at the rocky area and cannot move forward this turn. It has to wait and rally for the next round. Next example is this M10. The M10 has a movement allowance of 4, and I want to position this M10 into heavy forest to gain some more cover. The heavy forest is blocked for wheel vehicles, but this is a tracked vehicle and it needs 4 points to move in. But we have a yellow 1 possible terrain damage. So I need all of my movement allowance with normal action to move in here, but the opponent player can roll a yellow 1 damage on my Wolverine, and it is nothing, so nothing happens so far. Lucky guy. And the heaviest terrain we have a unit can enter is of course a building. So tracked vehicles are able to drive into buildings, and you see here a single story or multi-story, and I want to activate this tank now going into this red roof building, which is a multi-story, and it belongs 4 points to go in. This exceeds my movement allowance, which is 3 by 1, so I have to do a delayed action to go in here. And the disadvantage is of course this building strikes with a red 1 versus my vehicle, and my opponent player is rolling the red 1, and it has 1 hit and 1 suppression. And I can use my strongest armor, which is normally a front, a red, a yellow and a green. And so you see, for a medium tank it is not such risky to enter a building, but for a lighter tank of course it would be. Now I cancel all the damage the terra would make, and now I'm in that building without dealing big damage. So if you resolve the damage from terrain, you have some results possible. A critical hit result causes the vehicle to become immobilized. Ignore any further critical hits, so only 1 critical hit counts. All damage points are applied, and any suppressed results cause it to become suppressed. Ignore any after this first suppressed results rolled. So you see the critical hit symbol here. So if such a result stays after driving into such a terrain, this tank would have been immobilized. Okay, that's so far for damage from terrain. Special action for armored vehicles with tracked movement is overrunning artillery units. All armored vehicles with tracked movement who are not transporting infantry can overrun artillery. This is rated differently to a close combat. To do this, the armored vehicle must simply move into one of its frontal axes that contains an enemy artillery unit. As this is an overrun, unlike normal close combat, a fast action status marker is placed upon the armored unit. This will be threaded as a fast action in every respect, except it does not add one movement point to the unit's movement allowance. Overruns cannot take place in a hex if the attacking unit would consider it harsh terrain. When an armored unit attempts this action, the artillery unit in the hex may conduct a last shot. This last shot does not count as an activation for the artillery unit. The opposing player controlling the artillery rolls the attack dice listed on the unit cards, vehicles at a range of 0, close combat range. When making a last shot, the artillery is not allowed any modifiers to the attack roll. It just uses the attack dice listed on the unit card. Apart from the defense dice listed for its front armor, the armored unit receives no modifier to its defense dice. This is a straight comparison roll. Damage to the armored unit is assigned as per 10.7.3 and 10.7.6. If an uncancelled hit result is rolled. A command card can modify the attack roll or defense roll. The last shot can be conducted even if the artillery unit has already been activated that turn. This can lead to an artillery unit firing more than once per turn. It may change its facing by a maximum of 1 vertex to place the armored unit in its firing arc. If the chance of facing is not sufficient to get the vehicle into the firing arcs, then no final shot can be fired. The artillery unit is considered overrun and is removed from the game. This is a free action for artillery and does not require a command point. The last shot cannot be taken if the artillery unit has a status marker of suppressed, fallback, fast action or delayed action. If after a last shot the armored unit is not suppressed, immobilized or destroyed, the artillery unit is considered overrun and is removed from the game. If the armored unit is suppressed or immobilized by a successful last shot, it stays in the hex adjacent to the artillery unit and the corresponding marker is placed upon it. If it's destroyed, it's removed from the game. So I will show this process or these cases we can have in the tabletop simulator. Okay, just start with vehicles and tracked movement. Tracked movement is of course in the sign which is below the movement allowance. So here the M10 is a tracked movement and a Sherman is a tracked movement armored vehicle. Armored vehicles are differentiated because armored vehicle have, so a truck for example is not an armored, is an unarmored vehicle because it has at least only blue dice for defense. So when a unit has more than a blue die, for example one green dice, and it's an armored vehicle. Unarmored is of course everything which is at least blue for the defense dice. So you see here it has green and yellow and red dice in the defense. It says armored vehicles. Okay, and armored vehicles can basically overrun artillery, and therefore the artillery must be in the front arc and you have to drive into the hex with the artillery. But there's an exception. This cannot happen if the movement would be a movement into a harsh terrain. And we learned the harsh terrain rule in a former part regarding movement actions in the first part. So let us see these situations here. If the M3 is adjacent now to this 75mm ADG and wants to do an overrun, then I have to check first, is it possible, because the ADG gun is located in a heavy forest and my M3 has a 3-point movement allowance. So the terrain says heavy forest and I have a tracked vehicle. I need 4 points to get into this. So we have to check if for harsh terrain I have only 3. It belongs to have 4, so I cannot do overrun this artillery inside the heavy forest. But I have an M10 which has a movement allowance of 4, and then it's not a harsh terrain. I can try to overrun this artillery by marking it with a fast action, because it's of the rule. I have to do this like a fast action, and then I can drive into that 75mm ADG inside the heavy forest. So as I enter the heavy forest, I first have to roll for vehicle damage, because it could be that my vehicle got damaged entering the forest, and this is a yellow dice for example. So opponent player rolls a yellow dice for the heavy forest for entering, and it has a hit, and I can provide my heaviest, my strongest armor, which is red and green, the frontal defense die. So and I see there is a damage, and the damage is left to the tank, but I can proceed with my maneuver, overrunning this artillery. And now I can overrun. I'm in the frontal arc. If the 75 would have been orientated like this, it has a free shift of one vertex to get the tank inside the arc of fire, which is now the case. And last shot I use my values versus vehicles, so the top row of the with the vehicle symbol and with a close combat range, which is a red, and a blue attack die. Just grab my dice. If I play with the optional command cards, could have been that I have a card which helps for this attack, but in this case I play without these optional rules. And I try to roll my result, and of course the tank is now on the defense, and it is a frontal arc, is again a red and a green die, and therefore we can try the defense here, what comes out. There are not more modifiers because of this last shot or overrunning maneuver, and we see I can delete the 2 standard hits here, and a crit stays and a hit stays. So the vehicle got flipped by the crit and gets 1 more damage by the hit symbol, and the crit is triggering special effects, so we have to check for the critical hits versus vehicle units, and a critical hit results in the vehicle is immobilized. So the last shot managed to immobilize this Wolverine during the overrunning maneuver, which means that it got immobilized, and therefore it has to stand in front. It was stopped by the last shot, so the artillery was not overrun. So this is how it works basically, and of course I will perform a second example with different setup. So I want to show another maneuver to overrun artillery. I have now my M4 Sherman with 3 movement allowance, and you want to engage this 50mm inside a brush terrain. Therefore the 50mm is still firing. It was activated before with an action, and it is firing. So if I now activate my tank to move in the to overrun, I can move 1 free vertex change, 2, and with 3 I can engage from the flank. The artillery, even it was activated, is allowed to activate again for a last shot. It can turn 1 vertex for free and take a last shot. And this is the same procedure. I have in this case a red and a yellow die to perform a last shot, and again a good roll, and the Sherman has in front 2 red and 1 blue to defend this result. And It has again bad luck. A crit means that it gets, of course, 1 damage point, and a crit stays and says this kind is now immobile. So again, bad luck for the tank. It has not worked. So turn it back to the start situation, and then I want to show another approach how to overrun. So again, we have this ADG which is firing, and I have my tank here. I can activate it with a fast action, so I have 4 movement allowance. I move 1, 3 vertex change, 2, 3 free change, and go into overrun. And then I have the situation that this 50mm is not able to turn with 1 free vertex change the tank in the frontal arc, so the M4 can overrun this 50mm without resistance. So this guy is overrun. They are leaving their gun, and that's it for that situation. So now I can move in and make 1 free vertex change, and that's it. So I overran this 50mm gun. So important for this whole system is, of course, transporting units. Some vehicles have the transportability and are able to move infantry and artillery across the board. Their transport capacity is listed on the unit cards. Units being transported do not count towards the stacking limit in a hex. So the specified number of transport points, 8 for example, means the unit has a capacity of 8 strength points. Unless the special abilities state otherwise, 8 strength points worth of infantry and artillery can be loaded and transported. So in the example here you see infantry riding on a Tiger E, and you see a truck is loaded in infantry squad. So for the purpose of calculating transport capacity only, any damage on a unit is ignored. Full strength units are counted as being full strength, half strength units are counting as half strength. For example, a 4 strength unit with 1 damage point would count as 4 towards the transporting vehicle's capacity. Transport capacity. The transport capacity of a vehicle is normally shown on the unit card. The exception is armored vehicles, 422, with tracked movement. These automatically have a transport capacity of 4 strength points, which must be infantry, unless stated specifically otherwise on the unit card. Infantry being transported on this way will be referred in the rules as tank riders. So, how to load units? If a player wishes to load an infantry or artillery unit, they simply move that unit onto the same hex as the transporting vehicle. The unit is now considered loaded. Loading always happens during the activation of the infantry or artillery unit, not during a vehicle's activation. However, infantry and artillery units cannot be loaded onto a vehicle that has any of the following status markers: delayed action, suppressed, fallback, immobilized, close combat or fast action. Since they cannot be loaded onto a vehicle with those status markers, they are also not allowed to enter the hex itself, as the stacking limits would apply. If a unit is loaded into a vehicle with transportability, the unit counters being transported are placed under the transporting vehicle counter and the activation is ended. Any move status markers on the units being transported are removed. When an armored unit with tracked movement is transporting units, the units are considered to be riding on the top of the vehicle and in turn are placed on the top of the armored unit counter. The activation is also ended. If the transport vehicle has not been activated this turn, it can still be moved. I will show this in the tabletop simulator. So I built up a situation for the German Wehrmacht. They want to transport rifles or an ADG with a truck forward to the front. First I have to check my transport capacity. I have here a truck unit which is able to transport 8 strength points. If I flip the card, I have it more in detail. This unit can transport a number of units up to a maximum of 8 strength points for infantry or 1 artillery unit. So this means that I can place up to 8 strength points of infantry inside the truck and transport, or I can transport 1 artillery unit. So I have to take into account what I want to do. So probably I have a second infantry unit here, so I can decide bring both units inside the truck. For this I just activate my infantry units with a normal action here. So my first activation in my turn is activating this unit, and I want to place them inside the truck because it's a transport, so I load it in, and I can remove the normal action here. So the infantry unit is done, and the truck is loaded on. Then my opponent player is in his action, and he wants to transport infantry as a tank rider, and now he can decide up to 4 strength points he can transport as a tank rider on a tracked armored vehicle, and 4 strength points would have been the rifle squad here, which is a 4 strength point unit. So he can decide to put them up to the tank as a transport tank rider, or he can decide to take two-step unit with 2 strength points. Bazooka team has 2 and a Cal 50, so you can move 1 Cal 50 up here with a normal action. Then this action is done. The Cal 50 is loaded as a tank rider, and my action is done. So German player again is on the move. He wants to activate these rifle units and place it 2 inside the truck. So now I am loaded my 2 rifle units here in my next sequence, and the US player says I load my second bazooka team and tank rider up here, and that's done. So basically both players have loaded the units they wanted to have during the action, and because of the truck and the Sherman was not activated this turn, I can do this now, and I can move my truck forward, for example with a normal action, as far as I want. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and the truck ends his movements here. And also my Sherman can do move action and is getting marked with normal action, and he can also 1, 2, 3 forward, and it's done. So how to dismount the units? Loaded units are dismounted by being activated. This can happen even if the transport vehicle has already been activated in the turn. Any units dismounting from a transport vehicle are moved to a hex adjacent to it. Infantry get marked with fast action. Artillery units with a slow attribute get marked with a delayed action. During this dismount, players should make sure they apply stacking limit of 1 unit per hex if more than 1 unit is being transported. If any unit dismounts into a hex that counts as harsh terrain, then receive a delayed action status marker. They cannot dismount into a hex containing an enemy unit. As soon as a unit dismounts, their activation ends. Dismount can trigger reaction fire. So now we are back again on a battlefield, and let us assume that the turn is over, all white markers got removed. So initiative has the German one, and the German says, I have to push forward because I want to go into that objective here, and he activates his truck again. He moves 1, 2, 3, which is the farthest possible distance, and then the US player is on the move. He says, okay, here is another objective. I want to get close with my tank riders, so I want to position my bazooka team right beside, so I activate 1 bazooka team and I move it out here, and because it is a dismount action, I have to do a fast action. So next action sequence is by the German player. He has loaded 2 infantry units and he wants to capture that objective, and he loads his rifles out of the truck. So next sequence is with the US, and he says, okay, my Sherman was not activated, I will move forward with my Sherman. I activate it and I go 1, 2, 3 hex vertex, change to here. Then the German says, okay, I will remove my second squad here, and it is also marked with a fast action. Then the American has the sequence and unloads his Cat 50 into the church, and that was dismounting. If we have had now a 50mm ADG, an artillery unit inside the truck, for example, and it got dismounted, then we learned it is a delayed action. Also, if you load into harsh terrain, it is a delayed action. So players may ask how to load and unload immobile artillery, because we have the 88, for example, which is immobile and it cannot move into the hex of a possible transport vehicle. So normally a unit being transported loads up, dismounts in its own activation, not in its transport activation. So however, transporting immobile artillery is an exception. In order to load immobile artillery, the transporting unit moves into its hex. The immobile artillery unit must not have any of the following status markers: delayed action, suppressed, fall back, close combat. Since they cannot be loaded onto the transport with those status markers, the transport is not allowed to enter the hex itself, as stacking limits would apply. Once the transport enters the hex, the immobile artillery is considered loaded. This ends the activation for the transport, and it is marked with a delayed action. So it takes longer to load heavier artillery units like an 88. So this is simulated with the delayed action. And unloading that immobile artillery is done during the transport activation. It must be unloaded to a hex adjacent to its transport, and it is marked again with a delayed action because it takes time to set up again. During the unloading, the player should make sure they applies a stacking limit of 1 friendly unit per hex, and they cannot unload in a hex containing an enemy unit, of course. This is for every unload action. Immobile artillery also cannot unload if the transport has moved into harsh terrain that turn. So unload can trigger reaction fire. I will show this short in a simulator. So we have now intending to relocate this 88, which is an immobile unit. I have my truck, and the truck can transport 1 artillery unit, so I have to move my truck into the hex of that immobile unit. Clear terrain costs 2 points for my truck, and the light forest is also 2 points for my truck, so I need 4 points to drive in. This would be a normal action. So I will drive in 1, 2 with my normal action here inside the light forest. Therefore my truck marker of the action is changed because this is an immobile artillery to a delayed action. So this is now a delayed action. This takes time. The game turn is then over. The yellows are flipped, so you see in the next turn they are still loading this immobile artillery. So this is really a heavy process to bring this into the truck and load Eloquent. So in the next game turn, the truck is available with the loaded gun and can of course move forward to a new position, and probably he will do it here, 1, 2, here, 3, change, and here. So the truck was activated with normal movement. Opponent player is doing action, and then of course the immobile artillery can be activated and unload it to an adjacent hex with a delayed action. And then you see again, this takes time to bring it up again, and the game turn is over, and the next turn is still unloading and preparing the position, and in the next overturn the artillery is back to duty. So you see, this costs a lot of time. You have to think about if it makes sense during a battle to relocate immobile artillery. So be careful if you set immobile artillery up in the setup, so you can save time and have more time for fighting versus enemies. So one action for vehicles too is of course a hide action, like for infantry and artillery units. So vehicles can be activated with a hide action to prepare an ambush. A hide action for vehicle units cannot be performed in clear terrain or roads, so it's like artillery units, they are seen easily. To perform a hide action, the player activates the unit and marks it with the hide action marker. Vehicles cannot move during hide action. So this simulates a tank probably in a forest which want to hide its position and cover it, and therefore it is not a move action, but it's a preparation action to being hidden or to get into an ambush mode, like I described in the parts with infantry movement and artillery movement. Yes, that's so far for vehicle specific movement. And let us go to a last and final part, which covers special movement for movement with covering fire in the next part.